Hello, everyone. Hope you're all having a good night. I'm here with Eddie, my brother in arms, my comrade, and we're going to be reacting to a video from Ryan Chapman, this relatively popular YouTube channel that does relatively good YouTube videos on some topics. But I came across his video on the special military operations in Ukraine and on this proxy war against Russia, and it was very questionable, so I thought it might be good to react to it on stream, specifically because of how well done it is. I don't remember how many views it has, but it has quite a bit of views. And besides that one, we're also going to be reacting to a video from The Economist on Karl Marx and whether he was right or not. And of course, The Economist was the paper that Lenin described was the paper of the British millionaires. And I guess today we could say it's the paper of the British billionaires. But besides that, we hope to interact with all of you in the chat as much as we can and let you all know of some updates that we have coming up. Specifically, next week, Tuesday, May 23rd, we're going to be starting the basics of Marxism class. It's a sort of prototype for what we're hoping to do in the future, various classes led by different teachers. But Noah Krashevik, our editor, who, of course, I'm sure most of you know, he's going to be guiding this 8-week course over the summer. We're going to have probably Eddie and myself there in quite a few classes, and the goal is to bring in some uh, lessons where there's specialists that are tied to the institute who do a lot of work in that area to bring those in, and they can give a speech or something for 30 minutes, and then the class can continue. So I think it's going to be a very uh, fertile environment for learning, not just about Marxism, but also how to write about Marxism and speak. And so we hope to have that be a nice university setting, unlike we've seen in many years in the U.S. So without further ado, let's get started with our introduction.
Also realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
All right, brother, how you doing?
Good. I'm excited to react to these videos. Especially, well, I don't know which one I'm more excited for. Ryan Chapman's interesting. I like him because he always gives a fairly well fleshed out argument. Usually there's disagreements in there, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, but like it's always a good jumping off point to talk about our ideas.
Right, and he seems to be a lot more intellectually honest than you know uh, most of the other intro to Marxism videos that I've seen. In his intro to Marxism video, and he also has one on socialism that's not half bad. Um, but yeah, I think that in part those are the forms of presenting ideas that are the most successful for legitimizing a certain set of ideas. And I think that that's one of the things that we'll notice with the Ukraine one, that it's not so much about what's said or how it's said, but about what's not said and how he's able to paint a really nice and elaborate and thorough seeming and comprehensive seeming picture that makes the narrative feel very objective and very hard for the regular viewer to see where the leakages are and how how it still sustains a tubular character that we can pick up and and pull pieces here and there and see where how a narrative is being constructed that's not necessarily true. So, but that's the second one we're going to react to. We're hoping to do the Economist one first because that's the short and sweet one. It's like 4 minutes or something. But yeah, this is your second stream of the day. You had a long 3 hour one earlier. I didn't get a chance to see it, but how'd that go?
It was good. It was good. I can't even remember it now. But it was fun because we went for 3 hours. I was mostly just ranting about Elon Musk because I did a bunch of research into him lately, and like I knew he was a fraudster. I knew he was like any other capitalist who's just greedy and didn't really pull himself up by his bootstraps, but was helped by his dad's emerald apartheid mine. But if you look into the history of Tesla and SpaceX and like all of his, investments that are supposedly his crowning achievements, where he's made these great innovations, like he hasn't made any innovations. He hasn't followed through on any of the things that he's promised. So I was watching all these videos from this dude Thunderfoot, who I've followed on YouTube forever. It was like he works in like the Czech Republic or somewhere in Eastern Europe as a scientist, but he just broke down like things that Elon Musk said about manufacturing and like these hyperloop things that he was supposedly going to make instead of high speed rail, or that were going to be better than high speed rail. And it's just a total fraud. None of these
Yeah,
things have ever been developed or come to fruition. And meanwhile, Musk is, lobbying and arguing that we shouldn't invest in high speed rail. It's just super frustrating. So yeah, that's mostly what the stream earlier focused on, among other things. It was 3 hours.
I'm sure you. But there's I don't know if you showed it. I haven't had a chance to see it yet. But there's this image slash meme that has gone around the internet where it's Musk's promise of the thing he was going to build in California, and then China's promises, and you see over the course of the development how much incredibly more efficient Chinese socialism has been at actually developing rail and basically every single part of their economy.
It
Um,
Yeah, it is like worse than you think. Like Musk is literally ripping off these ideas from like science fiction novels because he
no
thinks they
way.
sound cool, and then they're just not being developed. It's like this is a stupid way to run production. Like I'm sorry, it's just stupid.
Yeah, I mean it's tied to how success is defined in society and how all these other virtues are like associated with money and with the rich because a good chunk of the population thinks that Musk is like really, really smart. And he's really just like this sophist, this rhetorician that has been able to learn some of the key words and put them together in a way that makes him sound a little smart. But I mean, I'm not a scientist. So when he starts talking about scientists, I'm not perhaps the best guy to debunk it. But um, I wonder if there's a lot of scientists like reaction streams or something, or if there's any that are just going through the stuff he's saying and picking out the holes in it and showing how it's very amateurish.
That's basically what this Thunderfoot guy has done. He's got a whole
Mm.
series of videos doing just that, and like the people who like remain Musk defenders and like attack this guy over his Musk videos are like not scientists. Then you can tell they've just bought into like his marketing campaign. These big promises, and then they'll make Musk will put out these videos like, yeah, we didn't hit any of our promises or any of our stated goals, but it's the direction that we're moving in. We're moving to the future. That's all that matters. What the hell are you guys talking about? All you did was promise a magic hyperloop to get a bunch of people to invest, and then you took their money, a big portion of it is profit, and then didn't deliver on any of the things that you promised, which is why Musk has been caught up in court a bunch of times for lying to shareholders.
And I bet that is itself like hidden quite well. But what's funny is that so many people see him not just as a smart billionaire, but as a hero of sorts. Um, Especially with like questions of climate change and stuff. And it just shows the sort of deficiency that we have of role models in our era of capitalism. And I think part of the project that we do, although we understand that it's not really individuals that make history. It's individuals that play important parts and great movements of that involve the people, and those individuals are rooted in, the conditions that created them. We do understand that, the figure of like the hero, the role model is quite important in every single form of life, and that some of the best role models of humanity, period, are tied to the project of constructing socialism. So that allows us to propose alternatives to these Andrew Tates or these Elon Musks to young people in our country and really in the West, because they've really grabbed a hold of a lot of young people in the West in general.
They really have. I want to acknowledge the super chat from
Yes.
Alicia
Yeah.
Chafin. Today, 75 years of Al Nakba, open fascists are running Israel as Palestine suffers three-fourths of a century of brutal occupation and genocide. Funded by the U.S. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Agreed. Yes, thank you. Thank you for being a YouTube member, and thank you for your kind donation. Yes, free Palestine. The Nakba, of course, is the event where Israel was basically founded as a state on top of Palestinian land, forcing thousands of Palestinians out of their homes to the point where 75% of them are living in refugee status now. In the past few years, the numbers of like children killed by Israeli missiles is just going through the roof. It's in the dozens. One of the stories that stood out to me from a few years ago is when there were children seeking trauma care in their homes from the last time that there was a bomb that left them with some kind of traumatic trauma. And then while they were seeking that trauma care, the building they were in was hit by a missile, and over a dozen of them died. So that's the kind of stuff being done by the openly fascist Israeli apartheid state that is shifting further right and openly right in their politics, but that's just a natural development, of what has always been a fascist neo-colonial outpost for the U.S. in the Middle East region. So, yeah, shout out to the Palestinians and their struggle, and solidarity with them always. There was a good movie about the Nakba recently. What was the name of that? And a bunch of Zionists tried to give it bad reviews, but it didn't work because it was amazing.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember the name,
Can't think of it.
but I mean, it's so incredibly sad, and the videos. I mean, they pop up here and there, but we've been so desensitized. Those sorts of videos. Um, the fact that they're not more moving is incredible, because it. I mean, it just breaks your heart. You see these kids dying basically every week from Israeli bombs, and it's stomach turning. And the fact that we have progressives voting uh, to fund the Israeli dome, it's just it's ridiculous.
And the U.S. media, there are some outlets. I mean, the apartheid is so out in the open at this point. It's
Yeah,
been reported on by the UN. Like there is some reporting, and outlets like Al Jazeera, although Shireen Abu Akleh was killed by the fascist Israeli apartheid forces for reporting on it. But
right.
there is some reporting, but not nearly enough. And of course, the media is willing to push stories weaponizing people's compassions around the war in Ukraine to justify sending more weapons and sending more funding there. But they have very little to say about the struggle in Palestine, which has been going on for years. So this shows where the priorities of the media are, and shows that the media is a bourgeois media that serves the imperialists. It's not anything like real journalism. I'm getting so sick of these fact check accounts that give fact checks that are just blatantly wrong. Like one of them today I was reading, I swear to God, all they did, their fact check was citing Elliot Higgins in a tweet that Elliot Higgins made, saying that somebody was wrong. And Elliot Higgins is like the founder, one of the leaders of Bellingcat, which is like a State Department arm, basically an arm of the NED, that helps funnel money through NGOs to help propagate regime change. It's so absurd that these people call themselves journalists, but
Right, right. It's a topsy turvy society where you can have these White House dinners where everyone praises every year the freedom of speech and the freedom of media, and talks about the censorship in Russia and China and other places of the world that are outside of the sphere of influence of empire. While you have someone like Julian Assange rotting in prison, while you have someone like Edward Snowden having to live in Russia, a country that's not the one where he grew up, uh, or someone like Sharia Abu Akla, murdered by the IDF, and for reporting on the truth, right? So there's an intimate relationship with censorship. It's not just the dissenting voices that are censored. They're censored because they're true, and because that truth that's being censored could potentially convince a whole lot of people. If they didn't think that that was the case, they wouldn't censor it, right?
Right. Eddie and Carlos, have y'all seen Lucia? It's a 1968 Cuban film with several awards. I haven't seen that. I watched a Cuban film recently. That was about the revolution. It was really, really good. It was a black and white movie. I can't remember, but there are a lot of good Soviet films. Do you want to jump into this video by The Economist?
Yeah, let's do
Was
it.
Karl Marx right? He actually was. Just letting you know ahead of time about everything. He's actually our God. We worship him because Marxism is a dogmatic faith where we believe that we will create a utopia that is heaven on earth tomorrow. So,
I should have
isn't
brought my
that
little
right?
Marx candle. Yeah, I should have brought my little Marx candle just to prove it. I left it in Carbondale, but I have this little Marx candle that I pray to every night. I get on my knees and I pray to the Marx candle.
I feel like I know what these guys are going to say already.
Yeah, yeah,
They're going to be like, Marx thought that he could create a utopia,
but Stalin.
but Stalin took Marxism and used it to kill everybody.
But you know what's funny? Before we started, somewhat related, but I've talked about often how in my class, in my intro to philosophy class, I teach in Carbondale. It's the poorest city in Illinois, and when I get to the Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mao sections of my intro to philosophy class, I also have Che in there. People just get it. Like the common experience is that this is just putting words to something that I have felt, that I knew for a very long time. It just helps me understand what I already understood better. So it ends up being like their favorite philosophers, their favorite thinkers. And I've been teaching for the last 2 semesters online, which means that I don't meet with the students. I just have to grade. It's the sort of gig that I have because I had a baby and stuff. So I've had to be away from Carbondale. But the difference has been tremendous when you don't have that uh, teaching guidance of people going through the text, of helping them break down and understand things. Because now, like the assignments, there's still those people that are replying, okay, this is opening my eyes, but it's so much less. And there's so many more that are just like responding to the prompts with the sort of archetypical myths about Marxism or communism in ways that are like statistically significant, a statistically significant difference than what it was in the previous like 2 3 years that I've been teaching the class. So it goes to show the importance of like guidance, and it's not like I'm indoctrinating the kids. I'm not fucking doing that. I'm like helping them think through these texts, but it shows the importance of guidance in the process of thinking and overcoming some of the myths and the ideological entrenchment that people are in. It's not something usually that can be successfully done alone. It takes other people helping you through that process.
For sure, which is what we're hoping to facilitate with our upcoming classes. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Karl Marx is often described as one of the greatest thinkers of the 19th century. His writings have inspired revolutions and generated centuries of fierce debate. Born in Prussia, now
That's good at least. I hate when they say that, or people like Ben Shapiro say Marx should be erased from history. It's like, what? Aren't you the anti censorship guy? Like, Marx was really important to history. You just want him erased, like he's gonna ignore everything. So at least they acknowledge that.
Right, and it's so incredibly degrading to a people when they're told that you shouldn't read this person because he's bad. But their philosophy has been influential in more than half of the world. You can say in the whole world, but it's basically succeeded at its height in half of the world, and now in about like 35% of it. Um, so it's the most influential modern ideological framework because um, the liberalism that dominates in bourgeois philosophy, they at least pretend to trace it back to the classics, even though we've talked about a few times how there's very little connection with the classics of liberalism and what we have now. It is like the most influential philosophical system, and um, I still feel like I have to, in a way, present an argument for why it is that these sorts of ideas should be taught in an intro to philosophy class. When really, if you think about it, it's absurd to even have to propose that. But that's the sort of background of Red Scare and anti-communism in the U.S. that you just weren't allowed to read anything related to Marxism because you could lose your employment. There was a million and one things that they could do to you.
Well, what you should be reading, those kids, is Ayn Rand. Back in my day, we'd read Ayn Rand, and we didn't have these problems.
Germany, in May 1818, Marx believed that capitalism, which was in its infancy at the time, had serious flaws. Marx claimed that in pursuit of profit, capitalists would encourage their ideology that work is good, leisure is bad, and material things will make us happy, embracing mass production, depriving workers of job satisfaction, at the same time exploiting the working class. He became involved in the Communist League, a small group of intellectuals who wanted to abolish the class system and spread wealth equally.
Pause it.
Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto in.
It's already a little better than the than one of the first ones that I reacted to because that first one said that he joined the Communist Party, and it was kind of weird because the Communist parties are a thing of specifically Marxist parties, and it made it seem as if Marx joined a Marxist party before he was a Marxist. At least here, they call it for what it is, which is the Communist League. But that's still not correct. He joined the League of the Just, and then within a year, with Engels, he basically staged a coup and moved it away from like the utopian socialism that they were entrenched in, and towards the scientific socialism that they had already begun developing. And they changed the name to the Communist League, and changed the slogan from "All men are brothers" to "Workers of the world unite." But before that, there was so much. It's so weird how one of the things that's constantly mentioned is um, that the sort of emphasis on Marxism as if it's a promotion of leisure, and that's always framed in like this very weird way, like that always fits into the stereotypes of like socialists are just lazy people that don't want to work and they're just entitled lazy folks. When in reality, the problem that Marx had with work, or at least at its essence, was that it was exploitative and alienating. The problem wasn't with work itself. On the contrary, work was seen as something that's uniquely human, the sorts of activities where we can express ourselves creatively in the best ways we can, and ultimately the most human sort of activity are the sorts of activities that we do when we objectify ourselves creatively and artistically onto nature in a social fashion. And that, in essence, was what work could be in a freer socialist society. So far from being like a condemnation of work and an elevation of the value of leisure, of the right to be lazy, it was at its core like a way of thinking about work as something that's freeing and that is actually within these specific social relations enslaving.
Plus, a little extra leisure time would be nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't want you working 12 hours, regardless of how creative and fun it is. Some leisure would be good. Yeah.
1947 with his benefactor Friedrich Engels, laying out the Marxist vision of a society where wealth is distributed evenly. Property is owned publicly, and
Pause it.
education is free.
Wealth is distributed equally. There you go. That's the other great myth. Socialism just wants to make everyone equal, and the socialists are the people that just want everyone to make the same amount of money as everyone else. And I remember when I first went into graduate school, I had a philosophy of race class, and there was one student in one of like the reaction posts that they did to one of the comments that I made, where I was like criticizing, the emphasis on race from like a bourgeois standpoint and the importance of like socialism for real black emancipation. Uh, they made a comment that was it said that even if you make everyone's income the same, you still haven't solved the race problem. I was like, this is so incredibly stupid. Like, come on, guys. This is graduate school, and you're talking about socialism being everyone makes $15 or whatever. Like, it's so deeply entrenched in these myths that have been created. They're so deeply entrenched in people's consciousness, and I mean, it's just false. It's demonstrably false. You look at any socialist state that has existed. There's been an inequality of income. Different labor has been valued socially differently, and so the remuneration for that type of labor has been different. You don't see the sort of differences that you have in the U.S., where like the average CEO makes 350 times more than the average worker, not even the lowest paid worker. But you do see a certain difference. In the Soviet Union, it was like a 10-to-1 ratio, and it's usually around that area. Now in China, it's a hell of a lot more. But what's done with the surplus benefits society. So that's yeah.
For sure. I don't even know if I have anything else to add.
For all. But Marx was little known and little read at the time. When he died in 1883, only 11 people attended his funeral.
Is that true?
Yeah, there wasn't many people, but the people that were there were great people. So he had the creme de la creme there. To use Lenin's phrase, he had less but better. But just to go back to one of the other comments that it said, because I think it's important for our context and like the way that the social democrats that are portrayed as socialists today describe socialism, it's always focused on distribution. And that's one of the things that she mentioned. It's where the wealth of society is distributed equally. And that's not really correct. It's not that we're not observant of the way that wealth is distributed. Of course we are. But we try to look at what are the conditions for the possibility of this wealth being distributed in such a way. And what we find is that that moment of distribution, it presupposes the moment of production. And our essential concern, the essential concern is in what the relations of production are, how it is that groups of people are coming together to produce the things that that specific form of society ends up producing for various ends. And capitalism is for the end of profit, for realizing what's created in the form of profit for the capitalist. So it is out of that moment of production and the relations therein that the inequalities are found afterwards in the moment of distribution. So you hear all this talk about the income inequality. That's good. It's really good that we're talking about that. But we should see what that's grounded in, and it's grounded in the relations that guide how we produce under capitalism.
After his death, his ideas flourished. Based on the theory of Marxism came communism, the realization of a stateless society where
Communism pre-existed Marxism. He just made socialism scientific.
all are equal. Communism became a global movement, but the utopian ideal of a
Also, I don't know that Marx's version of communism would be a stateless society. I mean, after the Paris Commune, he comes up with the idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat, where you got to create a worker state. But
fair and equal society failed to materialize. Communism tyrannized and impoverished its
At the very least, it's misleading because the ideal end is stateless, classless, moneyless society, but that's like phrased as That's not going to happen next Tuesday. That's not going to happen right after the workers grab power. You need this period that, God knows how long it takes, of the dictatorship of the proletariat, where the state is controlled by workers and all the institutions are shaped such that they are there to ensure the continued existence of power in the hands of the working class. The bourgeois state is smashed. The bourgeois state is abolished. The working class state is created. And then with time, with the defeat of imperialism, and with the natural, organic abolition of classes within civil society, you have the withering away of the state, and that's where you get the final goal
It
of.
withers.
Yeah, yeah. It Bill withers because there's no sunshine when communism is gone.
Are these the people who were tyrannized under communism, or who were smashed under communism? Because these people all look rich as hell. And
Yeah,
in places where communism took hold, like China and the Soviet Union, people were starving. People were, being sent to fight and die in imperialist wars. So
that's
yeah,
the
they
family.
probably did get rid of these rich assholes.
Those are the subjects of the comments that are made about my family had its property taken away under castrite communism,
All right. These are
totalitarianism.
the people who lost their plantations, and now you have to be anti-communist, otherwise you're evil.
Subjects and slaughtered them in the tens of millions. Today, capitalism
The tens of millions. I'm not even going to go into that. The freaking Black Book of Communism's own authors said that was stupid.
dominates the world. But many of Marx's criticisms have never been more relevant. Today, the global disparity between rich and poor is striking. Marx predicted that capitalism would lead to
Was
the
that?
richer and the poor.
This is the best way to explain the withering away of the state. You just keep on using me until you use me up. That's a
Drop
proletariat. It
it.
becomes superfluous and it withers away. And then Bill Withers is reincarnated, and that's how you know you've hit communism. But now they're going to do this thing that they always do, which is, but here's how Marx is valuable today, and that it's so effective because it makes them seem neutral and objective. And here's some good stuff, and here's some bad stuff, and then the balance is like, the bad stuff is those 3 billion people killed under communism. The good stuff is he was right about income inequality or something like that. um, but that's the Marxism that's safe, right? Regardless of the form it takes, whether it's an Economist video saying, here's where Marx was good and here's where he's not, or whether it's Slavoj Žižek calling himself a Marxist but condemning every single socialist experiment that has ever existed. It's the Marxism that says that every single socialism that has existed has been abhorrent, has been a big failure, a big mistake. Crimes against humanity have been made, or it wasn't actually socialism. That's the Marxism that's accepted everywhere. It's not only accepted, it's promoted, it's uplifted. That's what they need, because that's the safe, compatible Marxism. That's the purity fetish Marxism that they appreciate.
Yeah. It's an idealist Marxism. It's Marxism, but I hate all Marxist revolutions. It's Marxism, but I'm not going to fight for a revolution. Like, well, then what's the hell's the point? What's the point of being a Marxist then if you don't want to make the world better?
To bring up the example that Zizek gives paradoxically, it's it's like coffee without caffeine. It's like Marxism without like the soul of Marxism.
It is. It is. It's Marxism without practice, or Marxism without materialism.
Poor. He was right. He also predicted that capitalism would lead to boom and bust economics. Marx predicted that capitalism would lead to globalization and that a handful of firms would have huge market dominance. However, Marx...
So he got everything right, but somehow he killed 10 million people while doing it. And he was right about the capitalists controlling the media and the education system, but they're definitely not lying to us about those communist countries.
What that's the they are the media that they're admitting that he was right about. By the way,
Yes, true. They conglomerated, all the corporations have conglomerated, including the media and us, which is why we're lying to you right now.
Lenin was right. They are the newspaper of the British bourgeoisie.
Yep.
Underestimated the ability of capitalism to make everybody richer by making products much cheaper.
That's not true. He knew it was an incredibly productive system. He knew that, and he knew it was a system that would increasingly mass produce commodities, and would develop in that way, and that the fixed capital would increasingly increase in proportion. There would be increased production in terms of like an absolute scale. And that's kind of the role that even though, in imperialist countries, we have seen decay and a lot of deindustrialization, and, deindustrialization due to imperialism in general, holding the productive forces back. But in a way, that's sort of the role that capitalism plays historically, is building up and expanding the productive forces and this fixed capital that can then be seized and made public and used to benefit the whole of society.
I want to address this question by Shaya Bat CV. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Okay, I'm gonna grab some water while you do that.
Sounds good. And I feel like we didn't we aren't being perhaps as thorough as we could be, because it happens that at times it just feels weird to be so repetitive, and a lot of these things we talk about literally in every stream. But just a quick off the hip answer for the importance of defending socialist countries, the USSR, China, etc. One is because ideally we would want a commitment to the truth. Aristotle says in his first line of his Metaphysics that all men by nature desire to know, and what they desire to know is the truth. And the truth is that socialism has been incredibly successful. It's lifted hundreds of millions, if not a billion at least, people out of extreme poverty, and has civilized, swaths of people like never before done. And it's built tremendous wealth and lifted the living standards of hundreds of millions of people without having to do any of the things that capitalism did to develop its wealth, namely the genocide of the indigenous, colonization, enslavement of the African peoples, etc., etc., and while developing that wealth under constant imperialist hybrid warfare. Remember that the Soviet Union was, for the next, at least until 1945 and the Korean Revolution, it was for a good 3 decades the only socialist country in the world, which means that it had basically the whole capitalist world against it. And just the fact that it even survived is a very impressive feat, with the amounts of spies and different spies that it had within the Soviet Union from other countries trying to undermine it from within, and all the plethora of attacks that it faced, and the literal world war that it had to fight, defeat fascism in. And people forget that the West was hoping that Hitler would devour the Soviet Union very much. And even though Stalin from the early 30s was warning the West about Hitler and hoping to create a pact to defeat Hitler, the West did not want that. It wanted the Hitlerite forces to win and to beat the Soviet Union very quickly. And thankfully that didn't happen. But so that's one of them, a commitment to truth. The other one is as socialists, as people who want to radically alter the current state of affairs. We can't do that if we accept the big myth about socialism that's been fed to us by McCarthyism and Red Scare, anti-communist propaganda, which is that socialism has always failed. If we participate in the sort of activity that's archetypical of the Western Marxist purity fetishist, which is that we're critical of capitalism, but we accept its narrative about socialism always failing, we're never going to be able to organize our working classes at home. If you go to working people and you tell them, everything that they told you about the USSR, China, Cuba, etc., is correct, but we, the virtuous West, the virtuous Americans, we're the ones that are going to get socialism right, no one's going to follow you. They have to be as stupid as you are to follow you. So they're going to follow you when you tell them the truth about socialist countries and you explain how there's been tremendous successes, even though there's been tremendous pressure on it to not be successful. And when you explain to them, especially within the imperialist core, how successful socialism could be for them, how much of an improvement it could be on their everyday life, because of the fact that if we have a revolution in the U.S., there wouldn't be the U.S. to wage hybrid warfare against us. So those are just, I guess, two reasons why. But there's a plethora of other reasons which we're usually bringing up in our different streams. So
For sure. This is interesting. Seriously, why won't the Economist talk about Marx was writing about their articles during the American Civil War? Oh, yeah, because he organized cotton strikes that made a British invasion powerless. I didn't know that.
yeah.
That's very, very interesting piece of history.
The first international they made massive. It was prompted after the Gettysburg Address and after the visit to Britain of Frederick Douglass, um, uh, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and Wendell Phillips. They went to Britain, and in the eve of all of that, the already sympathetic working classes of Britain, when they saw that it was a war basically to emancipate a type of labor from a type of capital, they completely launched themselves into the streets in order to protest the intervention of Britain on the side of the southern slave planter oligarchic class. So, just keep this in mind as you listen to narratives about the reactionary or counter-revolutionary character of the 1776 revolution, which always implies a somewhat progressive character of the British crown um, uh, when it comes to the question of slavery. Remember that in 1865 ish, or in the 1860s, when the Civil War was taking place, Britain was going to intervene for the sake of the slave owning class, and didn't because of its own working class, which was led ideologically by the First International and Karl Marx.
Since the 1980s, the number of people in absolute poverty has fallen by about 1 billion. He also got wrong the capacity of...
Do you want to debunk the poverty thing? I've done that a million times, but
Yeah, that's what's difficult about these videos. That they're helpful, but from the standpoint of our sanity, it means that we're constantly having to repeat a bunch of things. But repetitio est mater studiorum. It's an old Latin dictum which says repetition is the mother of all knowledge. And I think that we've both experienced that as true. At some point, we need to hear things a few times before we learn them. So I do think it's important to repeat ourselves, especially when it comes to these topics. So I would say we should go for it and debunk the narrative that the lowering of poverty is the result of capitalism. I don't know. Do you want to take the first stab at that one, and then I can maybe piggyback off of whatever I feel like is left out?
yeah, I mean, it's hard to go into their specific statistics without being able to lay them out. I know we had a professor who would show us. There's a famous video where this guy says that global poverty has been decreasing over time. And if you tweak the statistics, you can make it look like poverty's been decreasing over time, but largely it hasn't, or largely there's still been giant swaths of people who remain in poverty throughout time and throughout capitalism's development. Depending on how you lay out the statistics, and I'm sure you could do that with theirs too, but I mean, of course, there's millions of people dying every year due to starvation and lack of health care. If you look at the richest places in America that capitalists hegemon, there's giant sources of wealth like Wall Street and giant skyscrapers in New York, but then there's also people living on the streets and people sleeping in the subways and, decay of the city in various ways. So where capitalism creates great wealth, it also creates great poverty. So there's this myth that eventually poverty will hit zero, and it's not happening anywhere except socialist China, where they're also industrializing the global south and helping African countries and Latin American countries and countries in the Middle East who have long had their productive forces held arrested by imperialism. They're having their productive forces developed by these Belt and Road loans, which only build equity, which is money that creates more money. So basically fixed capital in these countries. And that in fact is actually bringing people out of poverty. And China has in fact eradicated extreme poverty, which the UN is now studying because it is such a terrific achievement. So to the extent that you see poverty decreasing more and more, you know, around these times, that has a lot to do with China's poverty alleviation programs. Because if you think, there's over 1 billion people in their country alone who they brought out of poverty, and that's not even to mention the Belt and Road Initiative and the effect that that's had.
Yeah, I would even say it's perhaps going even before the 2000s, because the 800 million people that have been lifted out of poverty in China has been since reform and opening up. Um, what's often left out is that from the founding of the PRC to the period of reform and opening up, so from 49 to 78, in that stretch of 29 years, China, the life expectancy of the average Chinese increased by 32 years, which is more than a year per year. And that's the fastest, as John Ross reports in his book on China, that's the fastest increase in life expectancy in the history of humanity. One thing that's left out is that a lot of these developments in people's living standards and lifting people out of poverty have been done by socialist states, as you mentioned. The other thing is that the ones that have occurred within capitalist countries, they haven't been handed by the capitalists. It's not the capitalists that are like, I don't like poverty. Let's lift these people out of poverty. Let's give them better wages. I don't know. No, it's been working class people coming together, usually in the form of either militant trade unions or communist or socialist parties, coming together and threatening revolutionary activity. And in the face of that threat, the capitalists hand out meager concessions to working class people in the forms of reforms that lift their living standard, at least for a period of time. What we found in the US is that those reforms have been progressively pulled back since at least 1947 with the Taft-Hartley bill, and definitely it's been accelerated since the 1970s and the emergence of neoliberal financialized capitalism. But everything that they're pointing to as a statistic that proves Marx is wrong just proves that the class struggle works in lifting the living standard of people, both within projects that have won socialism and within projects that are still struggling for it.
Yeah, we did it. We debunked the stupid.
He also got wrong the capacity of capitalism to reform itself by creating welfare states that redistributed wealth through taxation.
Just read the fucking chapter on class struggle in Capital Volume 1. It's like the first chapter that's actually easy to read in that book. And he's just talking about how when the workers start getting organized and they struggle, or maybe it's the chapter on the working day, not the class struggle.
Yeah, that's chapter 10, sorry.
Yeah, the working day, where he's talking about, how the workers can struggle when they get together, they can demand political reforms. And how there's a dialectic between labor and capital, and they're in constant battle. And when the workers get organized, they can demand reforms, and they can demand that the government give them things like welfare programs.
And that's all they've given them, right? Again, the same thing with the poverty. It's been, these are struggles that have been won. Nothing has been won without struggle, as Frederick Douglass used to say.
Although there is a lot to learn from Marx, his solution was far worse than a disease. At the same time, it can't be said that today's capitalism, dominated by immense inequality and financial crises, has triumphed.
It's like they know they're going to lose.
Right.
It's like that's why the ruling class is so terrified of Marxism. They're like, we know eventually you'll figure out that he was right and you'll overthrow us. But for now, we're on top, baby. Popping bottles.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm just waiting for, well, if this doesn't work, and if the only sensible alternative is, in your idea, far worse, then, what are we doing? It's just back to Churchill's dictum, which, again, the Economist, British newspaper, which is that capitalism is the worst system except for all the other ones, right? Or, there's no alternative, or the end of history, anything from Thatcher to Fukuyama. it's bullshit. It's the same thing as Ursula Le Guin used to say. It's the same thing that the slave owners said. It's the same thing that the lords said. They always believed that their system was eternal and that the relations of production which guided their societies and their form of life will be eternal, and that their right to govern over the producers, the workers, would be eternal. And then history proved literally every single one of them wrong. And history has proved the capitalists wrong in a big chunk of the earth. And it's just pending. If you are sensible enough to, see these tendencies objectively, it's just pending in the other areas.
Absolutely. I don't get when did Fukuyama write the end of history thing? That always perplexes me, and I know he walked it back later in life. That's just such an arrogant thing to say, but like the Iranian Revolution was 1979, isn't I mean that had to be before he wrote that book.
I'm going to check
I
specifically. It
don't know.
was
That's a
with the
little bit of a
fall of the Berlin
sidetrack.
Wall.
What's that?
Yeah, I wanted to say it was with the fall of the Berlin Wall, but it could have been later on. It's 92. But
92.
92 is the book. I wonder if I remember it was. I think it was an article first, so it could have been after. But it was definitely after. In that period, that was very clear that the Soviet Union was gonna just fall, um, be overthrown, basically.
Right. And everyone had written China off as capitalist at the time.
What what's funny is that it plays on like a very bad reading of Hegel's philosophy of history, and the typical I've never read Hegel, but I'm going to dismiss him argument is that we get to the end of history, and the end of history is a Prussian state, and we're not moving anywhere after that. And that's, of course, wrong because Hegel is measuring history according to the notion of freedom. And he only says that in the sense that we have achieved a notion of freedom with the Enlightenment, that is, that all men are free. So all people are free. So we have the notion here. We're pending its realization. But the end of history, in that sense, from the standpoint of like the understanding of freedom, it's no longer the case that only one is free, the God, or only some are free, the select caste of special people. Now we understand that all are free. So that's what he meant by it. But Hegel's been so dismissed in the Anglo American academic world, and then you have this like butchered caricature of Hegel's understanding of the end of history used to describe the end of history and with the overthrow of the Soviet Union, at a period where, Cuba was still around, the DPRK was still around, China was obviously still around, but, even many respectable comrades like Parenti were skeptical of China's socialism. It was called the Wild 90s for a reason. But you had tremendous struggles all over Latin America. That's when neoliberalism was really, people in Latin America were beginning to feel the effects of neoliberalism and organizing all over the place against it. And they wouldn't really win until like the early 2000s with the pink wave, but um, you had to have had an extremely narrow view of the world to say that this is the end of history. You're making the mistake that they were making, quite literally a mistake that they say that Hegel makes, but that Hegel actually doesn't make.
Interesting. It is. I don't know how to expand upon it though. I was laughing so hard that the dude was high on his own farts after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the creation of the USSR. Because I imagine that's exactly what happened. Like we did it.
Right.
They're just partying. Finally, no more communism.
And then China,
Right. Well,
the
first they're like, let's bomb Iraq till
yeah,
they don't have any more industry in all of Central America. And then things started to change.
yeah. The John Bellamy Foster, he has this breakdown of the post-war period that's like three periods. You have the from World War II to the beginning of neoliberalism, and then from neoliberalism to 2008, and after 2008, he calls that like basically the age of multipolarity. Because when everything crashed here in the West, China was chilling. China kept growing. It was
They
doing,
were the only economy to have a positive GDP in that time.
yeah, yeah. So that he says that signified the emergence, the fact that the multipolar world was basically already here.
Mm, that makes sense. Yeah. Do you want to move on to our Ryan Chapman video? Or do you have anything
Yeah,
else
it's
on
a
your
it's a
side?
longer video, and you seem tired. So let me know if it's.
Yeah. Do you want to react to it another day?
Yeah, I mean, I'm
I
good
guess
to
it is
go.
11 o'clock, and I have spent 4 collective hours streaming today. I'm mostly just letting you go and then just cracking jokes,
Yeah,
but it's going good for
no,
me. So
I appreciate it though. Even just from the technical standpoint, um, setting up two computers to stream would have been a headache. So I very much appreciate your presence
for
uh,
sure.
and the jokes. But yeah, I'm good to watch the Chapman video. If you are, if not, I'm fine for leaving it another day. I'm happy to stream every night of the week.
Well, do you want to save it for tomorrow then, since you're free to stream this week now?
Yeah, yeah, I'm down. Sure.
Sweet. Okay.
That video of Wesley Clark is good. I don't know if you want to watch that. I don't think we've shown that before. I feel like I sent it to you once, but the conversation we were having went somewhere else, so we ended
Oh,
up
we
not
should
watching
watch
it. But
that. Oh shoot, I
um,
want to talk about Robert F. Kennedy today too. We should at least discuss that before. Like I know we've said like abandon the Democratic Party, but I
mhm.
was listening to that guy today, and like the stuff that he's pointing out in healthcare has been the stuff that I've been reading about and noticing for the last year studying healthcare administration, and it's going to be very hard for me to not vote for that guy if he continues to go after these things, because he's talking about how the healthcare industry and a handful of pharmaceutical corporations have captured everything in
Mhm.
the industry, from not just like the hospitals and the I don't know pharmaceuticals, but also like the academic institutions where they're training up doctors, and like these institutions who were like the WHO, who were supposed to be in charge of the COVID response, but who basically just use it to maximize their own profits. And this guy is calling it out, as he's also calling out the war effort in Ukraine. It's hard to it's hard to not be like, well, wow, this is exciting.
Right. Um, by the way, I was about to crack up at this joke. 3 minute video. LOL. Shit was the deadline for the Marx video today. Economist writer. It's like a class project that you forgot about and you're working on it the night before. Um, yeah, I've seen a couple of videos from RFK. I don't know. He seems like an old school Kennedy type liberal. I wonder if he's related to the Kennedys. I'm just messing with you. Um, I don't know. I don't know what the connection there is, but no, seriously, I saw that he worked with the EPA. He was part of the lawsuit against Monsanto, which was pretty huge and was dug by the media for quite a while. But it was he just seems like I still think, of course, he's a bourgeois politician, but I think he's one that has at least a slight bit of integrity and commitment to truth and maybe a sense of somewhat real patriotism, as in the sense of concern for the American people and their well-being, even if it's a very disconnected connection because of this bourgeois slash petty bourgeois background. Um, he seems like an honest actor, which is something that I don't think we have ever been able to say. We've said it before about candidates in the Democratic Party, and I think time has proved that we've been wrong. But um, I mean, who knows? I know that they're going to come for him for the vaccine thing, and I think that in the process of doing it, he's actually what's going to be shown is the sort of split between the media pundits and the ruling class and a lot of what regular Americans think, and that thing that they're going to use against him might end up helping him. The same way that it seemed like at the debate, not the debate, the townhouse thing that Trump just did with CNN. It seemed like they were really pushing him on the Ukraine issue to make him look bad, but in reality, he just ends up looking great to the vast majority of Americans that are against this war and that just want peace and the senseless dying to stop on both sides, and they want the war to stop being used as a way to legitimize why they're objectively poorer, because even though they got a 3% raise, inflation's like at 8%, and the trip to the grocery store is hurting their pockets more than ever before. So,
And
uh,
I could see CNN and MSNBC doing the same thing they did with RFK that they did with Trump, where like they're so up their own ass and they think like, everybody agrees with them about Ukraine that they'll try and attack them over it and it'll backfire and they'll end up giving them all this free airtime. Being like, how horrible is this that someone would run against Honorable President Biden? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if RFK has a chance. Obviously, has a ton going against him, but
he
it'll
was at like
be
20% on the polls.
who's that?
He was at like 20%.
I saw that. Is that I saw even ones where he was higher than that.
Really?
Yeah, it's like almost that establishment credibility that he has because of his name.
Right.
I don't know. Like, I'm not gonna do much with my vote anyways. Like, I'm not gonna go door knocking for the guy and get involved with the Democratic Party, but I'm a registered Democrat from the Bernie campaign 4 years ago. I'll go vote for RFK if he's going to call out the Ukraine war. I'm not going to vote for anyone else.
Right. I don't know. It's hard because I've besides the primary election with Bernie, I've never voted Democrat. So I was Jill Stein in 16, and then Lariva in 20, and I don't know. It just depends. I don't think PSO has like announced a candidate, and the Green Party, which is technically a socialist party and the largest one. I think it's got like 200,000 members. It just blows all the other ones out the water. I don't think it's announced a candidate either. And the candidate from the last round, Howie Hawkins, is Howie Hawk, War Hawkins, on the issue of Ukraine. That was so stupid. It's too late. You can't get me on camera this late. Um, but so I don't know. It's tough, but if the options are those, I don't mind. Sending in a mail-in ballot that doesn't take much effort or gasoline money for RFK Jr.
That's true. I think this is our time to run a Midwestern Marx candidate. It's like a huge marketing campaign for the website.
It's got to be you.
I'll do it.
So.
I'm not 35, but.
Oh, that's right. You have to be third. So it's got to be Noah.
Yes, that's what
Noah
we
or
do.
Tom. Yeah.
Or Tom, yes.
Yeah.
Tom would probably be down, maybe.
There was actually a thing. Some friends from the party wanted me to push Tom to run for president, like maybe 2 years ago. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that moment is not anywhere close to us. Like there's so much work that has to be done before we even think about running a campaign that's not just a waste of money and effort. There's so much work that has to be done in our communities, in our workplaces, and just reaching out to the American people and destroying the image of what socialism is in their head, and showing that we're respectable people, that in just how we carry ourselves, in our integrity and our honesty, we're Henry Winstonites and at the level of our character. And there's so much more that has to be done before we even think about running successful campaigns.
True. We got to get that grassroots organization going. Well, I think I'm going to pop out. If you want to react to the Ryan Chapman video, you can do it and keep going.
I mean, I appreciate I want to hear what you have to say about it, because I saw that one. I hadn't seen the Economist one.
Oh,
I saw that one, and I've been meaning to react to it for a while. So
yeah,
that could be the one we do tomorrow.
Yeah. Let's do it tomorrow, and then we can use that since it's a Ukraine video. Voosh messaged us today. He's back from his vacation in the Bahamas. He's he's ready.
He was in the
So,
Bahamas for real.
I don't know. I just keep picturing Bush in the Bahamas now, though.
Well, he's gonna be red.
He might be.
Yeah.
He probably didn't go outside during his vacation, but
He's just got a hotel room and put his computer down and just played something.
stared out the window.
I'm not gonna make fun of him playing video games because I know the company I'm in, and I don't want to get called an old man that spends
Yeah,
his,
Noah and I like
all his
video
time
games,
waiting.
and I don't want him to cancel the debate because we're making fun of him before it happens. He's gonna
Right,
bring in
right.
mad views.
Oh, I've actually seen this clip of Voosh going around the internet. That's him debating like this old black conservative, and he says something along the lines of, "I don't hate anyone except for black conservatives." It's so incredibly stupid, and it's been shared around, and people in the comments are like going crazy, calling him racist for saying that. But that's all I've seen of Voosh.
Oh, he's such a goofy guy. I'm gonna have to do a whole bunch. Like one guy says up here, he's done his research to smear you, but thankfully, so have I. I've watched a lot of Bush debates, so I'll
Okay.
have to sift through all his content about Ukraine. He says that Russia invaded Crimea in 2014, which I feel is like that was a talking point I didn't even hear, almost because it was like so ridiculous to say. And our friend Dan Kovalik is in Crimea right now, which I feel gives me a pretty good rebuttal point there. But I'll have to talk to Dan before I do the debate. But again, I didn't even hear that talking point till this year. Now people are saying Russia invaded. At least they were saying annexed before, but if you look at the polling in Crimea before the referendum vote, it was like 90% of people wanted to join Russia.
Mhm.
Like the pictures Dan is posting on Facebook, like there's Russian culture and history like all over the place. Like it's part of Russia forever, and the people have an attachment to Russia, and they recognize that Ukraine was being taken over by US backed Nazis. So like no shit they wanted to join Russia.
And I think it was even higher than that. If I recall, it was like stupid high, like 98 or something. Um, it's hard to say that's a fake vote when it's that much, but
It's
I
just
just
people who don't understand reality. Like that's the thing with Vooch is ultimately like he's trying to argue against reality.
right. Well, that's the thing. From what I've seen, like philosophically, and I might have just seen the wrong videos. I haven't seen that much, but I feel like a lot of these people are very much, in terms of worldview, in tune with postmodernism. So, like, reality ends up being reduced to something relative, and it's just a matter of how well you can construct linguistically your alternative reality and argue from that standpoint. So, he would say, I think, that the things he's saying is his reality. But, I think the most difficult part of it is the fact that we aren't usually participating in these sorts of debates where there's uh, people jumping in and all these slimy tactics that are done, and it's not just Voosh, it's everyone that does these sorts of things. And um, it'll be much easier if it's something that could be guaranteed that you can listen to what the person is saying, and then once they finish their time, you have then like 2 minutes or something to reply, and it could be a clean conversation. Because if it goes into that, hey, I'm gonna jump in, and then he jumps in a couple times, and you feel like you have to jump in, that ends up, I don't think, being very productive. And whoever looks best is whoever's better at being a sophist, at being able to convince more people by interrupting or by confident speech or whatever that they're right.
Well, that's me. Plus, I can throw more ad hominem attacks at that boy, like rapid fire. I've been sitting on those for years.
Oh my god. Uh,
Just kidding. I'll try not to. I'm just gonna be calm and say what is the truth.
I would, I don't know. Someone had mentioned like if it could be done through one of these debate channels where they do like at least try to guarantee that there's like 2 minutes for this person, 2 minutes for that person, and there's not a lot of interruption. If we're looking for something fruitful, I think that would be the best
Dude,
option.
we're debating Vouch. There's gonna be no fruit involved. Like it's just gonna be him telling absurd lies and trying to call me the R word for however long we debate.
Oh, he's comfortable with using it on air. Okay.
Yeah, he is.
Someone someone here mentioned we need critical thinking. They said something about RFK that maybe we can address. RFK Jr. is part of the cycles of controlled opposition to keep good third parties from rising. What would you say to that?
Uh yeah, maybe. I mean, like if there was an alternative third, like that was one of the things Carlos said, was there aren't very many good third party candidates this year. Like I'd definitely be more inclined to vote for one like that, but I mean, the CPUSA doesn't really have the capacity right now. We don't even have anyone who's 35 in our institute other than Noah. Like the Green Party, has the whole deal with Howie Hawk, which was a great joke, by the way. So I don't know. Yeah, I definitely get the point. I don't know if he's necessarily controlled opposition. As in like this is some sort of planned thing or he's being backed by the CIA or anything like that. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, he is going on major media outlets and debunking what they're trying to say is propaganda, and, Putin propaganda and misinformation. So he is spreading a lot of truth, which I don't think a CIA backed type person would do. But I mean, it's a fair point. And yeah, if there's a better third party candidate, I definitely support them.
And we've already seen like how much of a sensitive issue this is for the ruling class. Um, Again, Tucker, most watched cable news show in the country, fired. They're making up reasons why. The real reason why wasn't because he was racist, misogynist, or anything like that, or horrible, and all these other issues, which of course he was. The real reason was his views on the proxy war against Russia, the fact that he allowed some type of an actual opposition to go consistently on his channel and say things, at least in that sphere, that he seems to agree with, and other spheres that he disagrees with. But if they're able to fire Tucker, I would not think it's very likely that the controlled opposition that they would put up would be a guy like RFK Jr. It seems like it'd be more a guy like Bernie or something, someone who is willing to, in the key issues where capitalist imperialism unites people from every corner of the political spectrum. In those key issues, Bernie, AOC, these progressives are fully in line with the capitalist imperialist state. That would be, I think, the controlled opposition. Maybe someone like Marianne. I think
Yeah,
that could be the
honestly,
argument
she's
for.
more establishment. I don't know her politics, because anytime she brushes up against imperialism, she starts shifting towards the establishment line.
Yeah.
Whereas RFK hasn't. RFK literally said he has some CIA people in his campaign. I mean, if he showed me evidence of that, it would be worth looking into for sure. But that could also mean former CIA people, a lot of whom hate the CIA and could be giving him this information. Like here's the kind of people running this operation in Ukraine. Here's how dangerous it is. These are neocons basically running the show in both parties, is what a lot of former CIA people are saying now. And there could be, CIA influence. I'm not writing it off, but I don't see it as very likely right now, I guess. But
I thought it was his daughter or someone in his family who was in the CIA and who was helping him run the campaign. I can't remember who it was, but I think that perhaps tomorrow, besides the Ryan Chapman video, Russell Brand did an interview with RFK this week. I don't even think that it is on YouTube because he's been doing a lot of his stuff on one of these other platforms. I don't know if it's Rumble or which one it is, but we should react to that one.
definitely. That would
This
be great. I'll save my energy tomorrow. Like today I had lifting, 3-hour stream practice, and then I got all excited to do another stream with you. but I'm running out of steam now.
No, I've been unloading boxes, still finishing up this moving. Hopefully, in the next few days we'll be done. But yeah, shitload of grading. I got backed up on grading because of the move, so that's the farthest you can get from fun. Um, no, no offense to anyone out there, but grading sucks ass. Um,
I don't
but
think my dad was ever a big fan. He always would watch ESPN.
while grading,
Well, nah, he'd mute it during the commercials every time.
nah,
Go ham. I mean, it's different when it's Spanish. He doesn't have to like read papers.
right, right, right. But I mean, I love the classroom. I love being able to engage with the students. It's the grading that I think is always tough for people because it takes a lot of time and a lot of reading. And you're like, fuck, I could be reading Hegel, but I'm reading Joe Schmo telling me that communism and Marx was wrong because Mao and the Great Leap Forward. So I had one of those today.
Oh,
Uh,
that's awesome.
but all right, folks. Well, thank you for sticking around for this very laid back stream. And we'll be back tomorrow. Um, we want to discuss tomorrow the RFK Jr. candidacy, hopefully, react to the Russell Brand video if we're legally allowed to do so. I don't know if we are because I think you have to subscribe to watch this interview and pay to see it. But if we are, we'll react to that. If not, we'll see something else from RFK. And we'll also watch a Ryan Chapman video on the proxy war against Russia, which he very fancily tries to look objective, but just ends up spouting pro NATO propaganda through also a lot of the omissions that he leaves out. So, any last words, Eddie?
Nope, I'm excited for that tomorrow. I'm gonna come with high energy. So be
Likewise.
prepared, everyone.
All right, everyone, make sure to check out our publishing press if you'd like to become a Patreon. If you become a Patreon, you can sign up for Noah's Basics of Marxism class, which will start next Tuesday, May 23rd, and will be going on for 8 weeks. It'll be our first summer school course, and hopefully the archetype for something that we could do later on that's much bigger and much more university style, but with a Marxist core. So check that out. Check out my book, I guess, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism. And if you haven't already, the book launch that we did a couple of days ago with a bunch of great people. So, yeah, thank you to everyone for watching and see ya.
And economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.